Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, March the 26th, 2025. Yesterday I talked about Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, and I said that I don't know his time of birth, that his time of birth is not generally available. And it does seem I was wrong about that. His time of birth is indeed available. And there was a publication in the Northwest Territories where Mark Carney was born called The Northerner. And on March the 16th, 1965, it carried the following notice. Bob Carney and his wife Verley welcomed an 8-pound 11-ounce son, Mark Joseph, who arrived at St Anne's this morning at 7:56. Mark arrived in the best of health to make a fine new brother for Sean and Brenda. So 7:56 a.m. So that means, I'm afraid, I'm going to have another look at Mark Carney's horoscope. And you'll also see in the thumbnail, I'm going to be talking about Kamala Harris as well. Now, they kind of have something in common. They're both 60 years old. And Kamala Harris had her birthday just before the presidential election. Her birthday was in late October last year. And likewise, Mark Carney had his birthday, I think, 2 days before he was sworn in as Canadian Prime Minister. So is there anything special about being 60 years old? And that is also something I want to look at. And of course, this possibly relates to whether or not Mark Carney is going to win the election. I'm still not going to make any predictions or forecasts because I'm really going to be focusing on Mark Carney's chart in this video. And you do have to look at other things, but I'm really sorry to have to repeat myself, but the time of his birth is now available, so we can have a detailed look at Mark Carney's horoscope. But before I look at Mark Carney, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, March 26, 2025. As always, if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you indeed were to like it. If you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe. And here is the horoscope for today, set for New York at noon. And moon still in Aquarius, moon 27 Aquarius. In fact, it's the United States' lunar return, because the moon is in the most widely used horoscope for the United States, July the 4th, 1776, at 5:10 p.m. Philadelphia time, was at 27 Aquarius. And so here we have the moon at 28 Aquarius. I have no idea whether that's of any great significance. Though, this moon is coming to the end of the sign, and if you're in the UK at 7:30 in the evening, just after, I think 7:32, the moon moves into Pisces. Now, if you're in the United States, that will be earlier. So if you're in the United States, the sign change will happen at 2:32 p.m. So that means that if you're in California or British Columbia or Oregon, then the moon will move into Pisces late morning. So that's the moon, and the moon does indeed make a square to Uranus. That square to Uranus is possibly the most important aspect of the day from an American perspective. So moon in a fixed sign, Aquarius, Uranus in a fixed sign, Taurus, when they come together as a square, it can be quite a stubborn aspect. Things crashing into each other, people not prepared to move, not prepared to budge, certainly when it comes to ideas. Of course, when the moon moves into Pisces, at the end of the day, if you're in Europe, tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, when the moon moves into Pisces, things do change. There's a greater degree of flexibility. And also today we have a quintile between Mercury and Jupiter. Now, that's another candidate for the main aspect of the day. So Mercury and Jupiter, there's Mercury at 2 degrees Aries, Jupiter at 15 degrees Gemini. So Mercury and Jupiter are 72 degrees apart, 1/5 of a circle, and Mercury quintile Jupiter, it's quite an optimistic aspect. We have an idea about we have an idea that something is possible, that it can happen. But it starts as an idea, and that's so often the nature of quintiles. They're not directly expressed, at least not immediately. But there is a will behind that aspect. And if we want to make things positive through the force of our will, then perhaps we can get away with it. So, don't accept things as they are with Mercury quintile Jupiter. We can change the situation, and we can change it for the better. So that's the picture set for New York. If we switch the view to Sydney, Australia, the positions of the planets at noon. In Sydney, as a representative of Australasia, the moon is earlier in the sign. Moon is at 19 Aquarius. So moon at 19 Aquarius is picking up on that trine to Jupiter. Maybe that moon square Uranus is not going to be quite so prominent, and that moon trine Jupiter, especially at the beginning of the day, could be quite helpful, and it may be a day where we can be optimistic. I think we can be optimistic all over the world, wherever we are, because of that Mercury quintile Jupiter, but it might just be a little bit easier in Australia or New Zealand. Though, as the day progresses in Australia and New Zealand, the moon does start moving towards that square of Uranus, so by the end of the day, things could be a little bit tense. And then there is the heliocentric view. So, this puts the sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be. And, we continue to have this conjunction between the Earth, Venus and Mercury. You can see that Mercury is starting to move away from Venus, because Mercury obviously moves faster than Venus. And Venus is still pretty close to the Earth. So there continues to be an opportunity there with that conjunction, that there are things that can be done, and we need to think the best of ourselves. It's important not to be too harsh. We can do amazing things, and we can be appreciated, and we also can be recognized. And so do try to make the most of that Earth, Venus, Mercury conjunction. Okay, we're seeing a similar thing geocentrically: Sun, Mercury, Venus, and geocentrically, sort of Neptune as well, are all together. So we're seeing a similar picture geocentrically, but I just feel that the heliocentric view makes it just a little bit clearer. And that Mars square Uranus, it's still there. It's beginning to separate. Mars at 2713 Leo, Uranus at 2642 Taurus. But we shouldn't think that it's gone away, not least because geocentrically we've got moon square Uranus today. And so I would have said that when the moon is square Uranus, it's going to be more impactful when you've also got Mars square Uranus heliocentrically. So it's another example of a time where things can just happen, and we shouldn't expect things to run entirely smoothly. And we do need to watch the news. The world is not a stable place. And that's it. I don't think there's anything else to say heliocentrically. And now I want to look at things from a viewpoint of the 12 signs. It's another day when, in terms of exact aspects, there isn't so much going on, but just because you haven't got exact aspects doesn't mean there's no drama. I think the problem is when I do these 12 sign forecasts is that what I do is I look at the timing of the exact aspect, but just because an aspect isn't exact, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's like, for example, we've got Mercury conjunct Venus geocentrically, and this Mercury conjunct Venus is no longer exact. It's no longer listed as being on a particular day. Certainly not today, but still it is in orb, and it's always something I have to consider. So anyway, let's have a look at the 12 signs. So yeah, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, March 26, 2025. Aries. Aries, the sun is certainly in your sign, and Mercury is also in your sign. Venus is about to leave Aries, and it's still there just. So New York time. Yeah, Venus is at 0 degrees 25 Aries, but it's retrograde, so it's about to go back into Pisces, and that might mean that you could be on the verge of missing an opportunity if you haven't taken full advantage of Venus being in Aries. So Venus is the planet of relationships. Venus allows you to sort of get on with people, and there is an opportunity here. This opportunity has been staring you in the face, but when Venus goes into Pisces, things might change. It's not bad that Venus is moving into Pisces. Venus is going to be exalted in Pisces. It's always exalted in Pisces. But when that happens, someone may not be as easy to contact as they are right now. So if you're meaning to say something or get in touch with someone, now might be a chance. If you do miss the opportunity, though, don't worry. Venus, sure, it retrogrades back into Pisces, but eventually it turns direct, and eventually it will return to Aries, but not in the immediate future. In fact, I better tell you when Venus does move into Aries. So Venus will move back into Aries, once it's left the sign, April the 30th. So you might have to perhaps wait until the end of April if you've missed your chance. And that's not the only sign change we should be considering. It is the moon is about to change sign. So the moon is about to move out of Aquarius. It's about to move into Pisces. So in fact, moon and Venus are both about to move into Pisces. And Pisces in the Aries chart is a fairly low profile sign, and with that renewed Pisces emphasis, it just may be a time when you feel that you don't necessarily want to do so much, and the opportunities might not be right in front of you in terms of taking action. So this reinforces what I was saying. If you have got something to do, especially of a social nature, then it might be a good idea to do it sooner rather than later. If you miss that chance, then, are you going to get another chance? Well, yeah, you might have to wait another month. And that doesn't mean that you should be doing nothing, or just you take the view, what can you do? The day's nearly over. It's about to be over. I don't know what time you're going to be looking at this. Just wait till the end of April. Is that a good idea? Well, Chiron remains in square aspect to Mars. So I talked about Mars being square Chiron yesterday, but it's still there. So Mars square Chiron, Aries, does mean that you you want to do something. You rather not just that you want to do something. There is a certain obligation, perhaps, and you know it's not going to make you popular. Today is not always going to be about making friends, and if you have to say something or do something, then you should. It is a fundamental part of your self-expression, and there is perhaps a sense of moral obligation. If something is being done wrong, someone is being mistreated, something is clearly unjust, then you have to potentially draw attention to yourself, because people need to know. And today, Aries, you are going to be a real individual. You're going to want to be an individual. You're going to insist on being taken seriously. Yeah, because you haven't just got something to offer. You certainly have got something to offer, but you really need to force people to pay attention. And I think that in some cases you've been taken for granted, or it has been assumed that you're going to behave in a particular way. And when you're dealing with an Aries, that's always a bad assumption, because you have your own view. And Aries as a sign is actually very good at showing unexpected moral indignation. It can happen from nowhere. Everything is fine, everything is calm, and suddenly they tell you what they feel. You weren't expecting it, and you can be really powerfully impacted by it. I can think of a couple of events where I said something or did something. It was actually what I said something. I said something in a rather flippant way. I mean, I'm talking about things that happened decades ago. I was flippant in the company of an Aries, and I do remember that sudden indignation. Totally devastating. Didn't last long, and it still hurts. And so Aries can do that, and maybe with that Mars square Chiron, that might be what it's about. So if something upsets you and you want to have an impact on someone, an impact that could last decades, I'm talking about things, not just a couple of decades, I'm talking 3 or 4 decades. And it really hit me. It still hits me, and that's what Aries can do. And so maybe with that Mars square Chiron, and you've got Mercury in Aries as well. So with that Mars square Chiron, you can force people to listen, and you can be judgmental. We often think that it's bad to be judgmental, but today it actually may be okay to be judgmental. If someone is doing something wrong or saying something that is stupid, then don't hold back. Taurus, the moon is moving through the last part of Aquarius, getting ready to leave the sign and move into Pisces. And moon moving through Aquarius from a Taurean perspective is arguably quite a good thing. It makes you ambitious, gives you a sense of purpose, and you want people to know what you're about and what you can do. And the moon, while it's moving through late Aquarius, makes a square to Uranus. And this square to Uranus on the surface sounds a little bit difficult. I mean, it can be quite an unstable aspect, and it can also be very willful. It wants things done its way. But in your hands, this moon square Uranus aspect could actually be very useful. It allows you to assert your individuality, and if there's something you want to do, then and perhaps you should be very clear about it. Uranus, it's been in Taurus for a long time. It's not going to be in Taurus forever. In fact, in a couple of months' time, Uranus leaves Taurus and moves into Gemini. Okay, I think it retrogrades back into Taurus, but that's a reminder that it's coming to a close, this Uranus in Taurus period. And hopefully what you've gained from Uranus in Taurus is a sense of your individuality, the idea that you are someone who is different and you're able to have an impact, and it's quite a unique impact. And with the moon making the square to Uranus, it is a time to be open and upfront and not be too worried about what other people say. Because if you have decided that something is important, then really you should go for it. Another thing to point out, Taurus, is that Venus is getting very, very close to changing sign. And Venus has been in Aries for some time, and it's retrograde, and it's not in a great position, Venus, actually. But it is about to change sign. It's about to move into Pisces. And, when Moon moves into Pisces, you're going to feel, in some respects, a lot better. You're going to feel more sociable, more comfortable with yourself, and you might have another chance to sort of go back over old ground, particularly old ground of a social nature. So if you're making plans for the next week or two, then don't forget your social life, don't forget other people. You may feel that right now your social skills aren't 100%, but they are about to improve. And certainly that's something I'm going to be talking about over the next couple of days, once Venus has changed sign. So overall, Taurus, it's a day when you can get yourself together and you can really think about what you can do and what impact you're having. And it is very important that you take yourself seriously. And self-discipline is going to really matter. And you don't do something just because it's fun or just because it's relaxing. Yeah, sure, you have a sense of fun, but I don't think that your sense of fun in itself is on great form today. And one reason it's not on good form is because you do understand that there are things that need to be done. And okay, maybe you can enjoy them, but fun for the sake of fun, I don't think so. And in some respects today, Taurus, you're quite a serious person. You're not someone to be taken lightly. Gemini, Mercury is making a quintile to Jupiter. And this quintile to Jupiter is something that should be welcomed. Quintiles may not be regarded as a major aspect, but I think that we should take them into account. And if you think about it, Mercury is your ruler. It's aspecting Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of good luck, and Jupiter is in Gemini. So with Mercury quintile Jupiter, you have plenty of ideas. In fact, you're full of ideas. And you are aware of possibilities. Now, in a first instance, it might not seem as if there's any realistic chance of these opportunities being realized, especially with Mercury going retrograde. So, Mercury retrograde, Mercury might be feeling slightly sorry for itself, especially as Mercury's conjunct the Sun. So you might start the day thinking there's not much point in doing anything, at least doing anything that is important or dramatic, because there's too much stuff to deal with. There are delays, there are complications, and You have to deal with other people, and they may not be especially cooperative. But if you pause for thought and you allow your optimism to start working, and you try to be positive, then ideas will start to form. And where there is an idea, there is certainly a possibility. I'm not asking you to drift off on a cloud of fantasy. Some things really are realistic. But if you're in a situation where you think that something is possible, but you're just wondering whether can you get it together, well, you'd have to organize this and you'd have to organize that, and you might have to be a little bit brave, and can you be bothered? If it's like that, then give it a go, Gemini. Don't doubt yourself. This Mercury quintile Jupiter can be an important aspect, and I do think that you can make it work. And this Mercury quintile Jupiter might also have an impact on relationships. So do you have any ideas about how you would like to get on with another person? It doesn't have to be anything massively intense or meaningful. Just a feeling that you and someone else can get together, even if it's just for a short period of time, and you can work on something, or perhaps you can enjoy each other's company, or whatever your motive is for considering the possibility of such a relationship. And with that Mercury quintile Jupiter, you can make it happen if you're prepared to put in the effort. And effort starts with having the idea that something is possible. And if you believe something is possible, in many cases, it can actually happen. So overall, Gemini, it's just important not to doubt yourself. Additionally, we have the moon changing sign. Moon is moving from Aquarius into Pisces. Okay, the moon might not go into Pisces until this evening if you're in Europe, or tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But if you're in California, then the moon goes into Pisces late this evening. Ditto Oregon or British Columbia or Washington State. Even earlier if you're in Alaska or Hawaii. So as the moon moves into Pisces, it is a time to be thinking about what is possible and what needs to be done. While the moon is in Aquarius, you might have been in a state of contemplation and thinking about different ideas, but not committing yourself. But as the moon moves into Pisces, you should be becoming more committal, and you can start to work out what you need to do, and that is likely to sort of set the pattern for the next couple of days. And certainly over the next couple of days, you should try as hard as you can to have a busy time where you are really concentrating on your ambitions, whatever they might be. Cancer, Mars continues to be square Chiron. I talked about Mars square Chiron quite a lot yesterday, so I don't want to repeat myself, but I must emphasize that I think it is an important aspect, and it does suggest that you have a strong sense of what needs to be done. It may not be about what you want to be done. It's rather, what you need to do and what you are obliged to do. So if you do feel a certain sense of obligation, then you may have no choice. And you also have to consider, what are your motives? Your motives might be just self-advancement, but I think it could be more than that. I do believe that there is a moral dimension to this Mars square Chiron. Other people look away, other people can't be bothered, but you realize that you have the obligation. There are things that you have to do. It's down to you because you're the one that gets it. And so you have to take appropriate action. And might be about complaining. It might be forcing people to notice something because something is going on that maybe just isn't right. So Cancer, there is work to be done, and I also think that today you are taking yourself seriously, and indeed you should be taking yourself seriously. And there are things you could notice over the course of the day which can't be unnoticed. And at some stage in the day, or it could be tomorrow, the moon does change signs. It does move from Aquarius to Pisces. And that Mars square Chiron is still very much in existence. It can't be ignored. But when the moon moves into Pisces, probably things get a little easier. When the moon moves into Pisces, it doesn't straight away make any major aspects. So it does eventually make a square to Jupiter, but not immediately. And so when the moon moves into Pisces, things may get easier. They may be less pressure, and you may have more time to think and explore. There are things that you need to discover, you need to work out, and you need to also consider what options are available. You mustn't see things in terms of just one course of action. And that might be the temptation at the beginning of the day, at least, with a moon square Uranus. Moon square Uranus, it can be stubborn, it can be willful. You decide you want something done and it's got to be done in a particular way, and you're not very flexible about it. And then the moon moves into Pisces and you have a broader view, and you start to realize that there are several ways of reaching your destination. And it might be a good idea to be a little experimental. Now, you could take that too far with that moon square Jupiter, but moon isn't square Jupiter today. It's square. It makes a square tomorrow, so we can worry about that tomorrow, and I don't even think it's a particularly big worry. So overall, Cancer, I do think there are things you need to do, and I think you just need to get on with it. And if you do feel that something is wrong, things are being done wrong, people have a wrong attitude, then you can't really keep it to yourself, can you? Leo, the moon is in late Aquarius, and so with the moon in late Aquarius, there might be a continued emphasis on other people and what other people are doing, and you may find it difficult to be entirely independent, having to consider the constraints of others. They want things done in a particular way, and they can't necessarily be negotiated with, and that might be a little irritating. And at a certain stage it might feel that something has to give. The moon in Aquarius makes a square to Uranus, and that might be the feeling of today. Moon square Uranus, you feeling tense, other people feeling tense. You want your freedom and you can't get it, and as a result your behavior might be a little bit unsettling, in the same way that you regard other people's behavior unsettling. And so what perhaps you need is a certain amount of distance. And if you tolerate a difficult situation for too long, then you might start to get all sorts of ideas. You might start to think about negative possibilities, and if you hang out in a bad place for long enough, the corruption and the disintegration will start to become very obvious for you, and that may be a part of what's going on today. That everything has its limits. If you stay in one place for too long, if you stay with the same person for too long, then yeah, inevitably you get decay, and you start to see someone for what they are, and you don't like what you see. Or again, if you hang around in the same place for too long, you start to see the rot. You start to see the wallpaper peel away from the ceiling. You start to see the cracks, and that does happen. Now, you could say, well, maybe you should hang around long enough to see the decay that is all around us. But, that's not going to be great for your peace of mind. And what is the point in seeing decay if there is nothing you can do about it? So maybe, Leo, it might be a good idea if you try to keep moving, because where there is movement, there's action, and where there's action, there is life. And in the end, the moon moves out of Aquarius and into Pisces, and this could be more of the same, except more intense. So with moon in Aquarius, other people were important. Moon moving into Pisces, you're more independent, but you're more thoughtful, and your feelings are more powerful, and you're more intense, and you're prepared to stay with things. And that would mean that if you have decided to hold your ground, stay where you are, stay with an existing crowd of people, stay in a place that you really should have left some time ago, then you're really going to start to see what is wrong. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I have indicated that it might be a bad thing. Why spoil your peace of mind? But if you really want to persist with it, if you want to see how bad things really are, there are some benefits, because you are being realistic. And maybe that is a question for you, Leo. How realistic do you want to be? There are no planets in Earth signs at the moment, except for Uranus. So, a lot of people are ungrounded. They're thinking about everything except for the thing that matters. And the thing that matters is that sense of decay, that something needs to be fixed, and it's a real problem trying to fix it. And you, Leo, at least in the end, can see this problem. But do you have a solution? I don't know. That might depend on you. Virgo, Mercury in its own way is quite busy today. I'll show you what I mean. So, this is the normal chart, but if we were to look at the 90-degree dial, and we put Mercury on the pointer here, you can see Mercury is on the Sun-Venus midpoint, it's on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, it's on the Sun-Aries midpoint, it's on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So Mercury is at the focus of a lot of stuff, and you are therefore, Virgo, picking up on an enormous amount. And it can be difficult, and your feelings may be in overdrive. Mercury is trying to make sense of it. Mercury is still in Aries, by the way, so you're trying, Virgo, to take the initiative. You're trying to make things happen, and you'd love things to be simple. But as you can see from a 90-degree dial, things are not necessarily simple. You're picking up on all sorts of material. Mercury on the Sun Aries and Sun node midpoint, those are connections. Those are connections relating to other people and also to society at large. And you're right in the middle of it. You are picking up on it all. And yes, that can be exhausting, but it also potentially puts you in a strong position, provided you don't allow yourself to be swept away. You could be. I mean, that is a danger. And that means, Virgo, that you should avoid taking on too much. I mean, that would be a bad idea, and you have to have some appreciation of your sensitivity, and you have to give yourself space and just recognize that you can't solve every problem that's out there, and some things just are confusing, and they have to stay confusing because you can't sort them out. No one can sort them out, and sometimes you just have to deal with the world as it is. But Virgo, it's important that you don't feel helpless, and that you actually recognize that in your own way, in your own world, there are things you can do. And that has something to do with the fact that Mercury, which is of course your ruler, is making a quintile to Jupiter. Jupiter is a fortunate planet. The quintile aspect is about the will. It's about you concentrating on something, deciding on a plan of action, deciding that something really is possible, and then making it happen. To begin with, you might not be sure how it's going to work out, and you might have real doubts. But if you just go through the logical stages, from idea to will to concept to action, you can certainly have an impact, and you can get noticed. And you can get noticed, at many levels. It might be about your ideas and how you're such an inspiring person, but it might also be about something simple and down to earth, like in a sort of career sense, if you're working, or it could be about having some straightforward project that is an important part of your ambitions, and you feel you want to get going on it. You can. So Virgo, be aware of how complicated the world is, and just be aware of all the stuff that you're picking up on, and you might just feel that it is too much, but it's not too much, provided you're able to sort out what you can do and put to one side what is simply impossible, and then come up with a plan. And in the end, things really can move. Also, from a relationship perspective, that Mercury quintile Jupiter does allow you to get on with people, even people who you feel under normal circumstances you can't get on. You might feel that there's an incompatibility there, but if you want to bridge these incompatibilities, at least in the short term, I think that you definitely can. Libra, the moon starts today in Aquarius. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it continues the whole day through going through Aquarius. But if you're in the Americas, certainly there will be a sign change, and the moon, maybe as early as late morning if you're in California or Oregon or British Columbia, the moon will move into Pisces. But while the moon is in Aquarius, you still have a sense of what you can do, and a belief in your fundamental creativity. And sometimes to be creative, you need to be ready to cause a surprise. You don't want anyone to be complacent. People can be complacent, and they can just assume that things are just going to carry on in the same old way, and they might, but you don't want to court stagnation. Stagnation is unnecessary, and there is something you can do, Libra, which can stir things up and give people a little bit of a shock. That is the nature of moon square Uranus. And in general, Libra, there's something about your approach that is quite serious. You know that nothing can be taken for granted, and you don't want to give too much away. And while you can shock people if you want to, there is also something about you that is slightly risk averse, because you regard the world as being a little bit unstable at the moment, and that also has some connection with Venus, your ruler. Venus is in Aries, but it's about to move into Pisces, so that may say something about you. You may feel that you are on the brink of a change, and you don't want to go too far too early, because if you were to take a big initiative now, then you might find the basis for this initiative just changes, no longer holds true tomorrow. Because when Venus changes sign, moves into Pisces, everything changes. And some things do get better. When Venus moves into Pisces, you're going to become more sensitive, in a good sense. Venus, remember, Venus in Pisces, Venus is exalted in Pisces. And also Venus is getting pretty close to a conjunction of Neptune. You can feel that conjunction to Neptune. You've already had a conjunction to Neptune. You thought you got over it, and you haven't got over it because it's coming back. And Venus conjunct Neptune may be about the inevitable confusion that has to take place as you move from one place to another. It's that sense of things breaking up as you transform. Everything is total chaos. And then things come back together again, and everything is normal. Everything is the same. But it is, if you like, a separate reality. I think that separate reality wasn't Castaneda. Didn't Castaneda write a book called Separate Reality? And I think that that's what separate reality is about, or that's one concept that you can take from separate reality. It is reality, but it is a reality that is completely different. It's different and it's the same. And that's maybe what you're going through. Things are just starting to disintegrate a bit. Or if you, I don't know, with C.S. Lewis, you can think about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You're in one reality, and then you're in the other reality, and the process you're in at the moment might be as you're in the wardrobe. You're not on Earth, you're not in Narnia, but you're just in the middle. And that might be how it feels. And so you just go with it. And while you're in this period of transition, you don't try to initiate anything all by yourself, because you simply don't have the strength. But it is a time to be optimistic and hopeful, because things are changing. Venus is moving into Pisces, and of course Venus is exalted in Pisces, and soon enough you'll see the benefits of that sign change. Scorpio, you possibly should be thinking about yourself and what you can do. You don't have to worry too much about what other people are doing, what other people are thinking, what other people are believing. It really doesn't matter. You need to be, as far as possible, concentrating on, what matters to you. And one way of looking at that is to say, well, what you're good at and what you're bad at. If you're not good at something, you shouldn't be doing it. That would be a waste of time. And it's likely that someone else can do it much better than you. On the other hand, if you're an expert, then focus on your expertise. Your expertise is clear and obvious, and really that is what you should be doing. Also, Scorpio, we have a square aspect between Mars and Chiron. We had a Mars-Chiron square yesterday, but that Mars-Chiron square is still around, and that Mars-Chiron square may just amplify what I've just said. It is about what makes you different, and that is one nature of Chiron. You are someone who does things differently. You're not someone who just follows the crowd, does what everyone else does, doesn't rock the boat. That's not what Chiron is about. And with Mars square Chiron, you have the opportunity to think about things in a completely different way. It's a different way in terms of what other people are doing, but as far as your reality is concerned, it's not different at all, because it is a reflection of your individuality, and everything needs to fit in with you. And that's often seen as being not desirable, too much ego, but there is a time for everything. And right now, it is a time for everything to fit in with you. It's your schedule that matters, not other people's schedule. And if there is a timetable clash, or someone can't accommodate you, well, they need to accommodate you. It's not a time to accommodate other people, and you need to be quite firm about it, right from the beginning, because your individuality does matter, and your individual perceptions matter. And if you perceive that something is out of sync, is out of order, is not right, Scorpio, then be clear about it, with this Mars square Chiron, and don't leave any doubts. People need to understand that things aren't good enough, you're unhappy about it, and you might even feel that something is immoral, is bad, and cannot continue. And with that Mars square Chiron, that motivates you to do something about it, to say something. And people might not like your message, but I think in the end they will listen. Additionally, you should not assume when dealing with other people, even the people who are very close to you, you shouldn't assume that they are one way or another, that they have a particular perspective, or that they are going to be stubborn, they're not going to do things your way. Don't make those assumptions. People are actually not as committed to anything as they seem to be on the surface. And that can have several dimensions. It might mean that some people aren't trustworthy, but it also might mean that if someone is being very stubborn and they're giving you trouble, and you might think that they just cannot be moved, they can't be shifted, maybe they can be. Just keep up the pressure. And Scorpio, I think in the end, you will be able to get your way. Sagittarius. Sagittarius Mercury is making a quintile to Jupiter. Mercury quintile Jupiter is a fortunate aspect, and it's an aspect that allows you to communicate. You can say what's on your mind, and you can also be clever. You can do things which really show off your fundamental abilities. But it starts with you, and it starts with what you want. And when you're talking about Mercury quintile Jupiter, and indeed if you're talking about quintiles in general, you're talking about the will. And it's about the power of your personality. You have an idea that something is possible, that something can be communicated. And just because people haven't listened in the past doesn't mean that they won't listen in the future. There's always a way to say something. So this Mercury quintile Jupiter could be especially useful if you're into advertising or public relations, or perhaps if you're a writer, you're a journalist, if you're just trying to get a message across, then it really is going to be helpful. It is always a way of getting people to listen. And the most stubborn people can pay attention. And all it takes is the right words at the right time. And that Mercury quintile Jupiter is really going to help you out there. And this Mercury quintile Jupiter might also be useful as far as relationships are concerned. You can get on with people. There's always a way to get on with people. And if you believe that someone could be useful to you, or you can imagine how someone could help you out in a critical way, that's the beginning of it. Then you can find a way of harnessing their power for your benefit, and perhaps you've got something to offer them as well. It's not just about pure selfishness. Sagittarius only thinking about itself. No. It's a situation where I do believe that everyone can benefit, but you do have to think about yourself. And as the day gets underway, you are going to be increasingly self-sufficient, or at least you're going to want to be self-sufficient, and you're not going to be in the mood for a lot of variety, a lot of travel, a lot of action. And then the moon moves into Pisces, and this moon moving into Pisces, depends where you are, but it's sort of around sort of late morning, lunchtime if you're in the Americas, sort of early afternoon at the latest. If you're in Europe, it's this evening. Tomorrow, if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when the moon moves into Pisces, whenever the moon does move into Pisces, it could be a time of quiet. There is a period when the moon moves into Pisces where it doesn't really make any major aspects to any other planet. Eventually, it makes a square to Jupiter, but while the moon is moving through early Pisces, it just might be a time where you can relax. You can still have your impact, whatever impact you want, whatever your will wants. You do have strong willpower, and other people are going to listen to you if that's what you want. But it's not obligatory, and as time goes on, you are really going to start to appreciate your own company, and there can be a sense of relaxation, peace, and harmony. So, overall, Sagittarius, it's probably a day where you've got a lot of options. There is a chance to have a really powerful influence, and you can get real results, but you don't have to be obsessed about it. And it just may come a time where you just want to just relax, and there's nothing to feel guilty about there. Capricorn, at the moment, you are a fairly effective communicator. You're able to say what's on your mind, very clearly, and people are going to listen to you, and also you can make people feel good about themselves. You just present things in a way that it makes people happy. So do make the most of this. And I do understand that Capricorn has a certain reputation for being hyper realistic, and it's always good to be realistic, but your choice of words can make a difference, and you don't have to be realistic just for the sake of it. And in fact, you can be realistic but also be helpful, and you're going to be very good at making suggestions. And even if someone is in real trouble, things don't seem to be going well for them, you'll know what to say. And this means that if you're in the business of making people feel better, for example, if you're a counselor or a psychotherapist, you really can have a positive impact. And even if you're not, do think about the general morale of the world in which you're living. Not everyone is happy. There are a lot of things going on which could be very discouraging. But from your perspective, you've almost seen it all before. Maybe not if not in this incarnation, then in a previous one. So you've seen it all before. You know how it all works out, and you can see the positive line, because there's always a positive line. And if things are changing, that in itself is positive. So the power of your words really, really does matter. And as the day progresses, as the moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces, I think that the power of your words will become, even more important. And you're not going to be pushing anything. You're not going to be pushing any agenda. Okay, you could push an agenda if you want to, but I don't think you have to. That's not where your job lies. Your job lies in creating the right atmosphere. Then maybe you can push an agenda. But if you can just create an atmosphere where people are happier, they're more relaxed, more confident, then you could say Capricorn, that your job is done. And so there is then a certain sense of obligation, and we shouldn't forget that Chiron is still being aspected by Mars. Chiron, like yesterday, you've got Chiron in Aries. Mars is making a square to Chiron. Now that Mars square Chiron might manifest as things that appear to be slightly out of control in the first instance, but you have the opportunity to bring them in control. You can maybe through the power of your words create change and give angry people a sense of perspective, because there are certain people out there who do have a bit of anger. Maybe it's actually justified anger. There's nothing wrong with being angry in an absolute sense. If there are things to be angry about, then what are we going to do with that anger? And from a political perspective, or if people are annoyed about the way things are going, then you can calm people down, and you can show them that there are many ways of taking action, and you don't have to feel frustrated. And of course, everything changes. And I think it's very important that you remind yourself of that, and also that you remind other people of it as well. There's no such thing as a permanent state of affairs, because changes everywhere. And just when things seem absolutely grim, there is that changeover. And you might actually be experiencing a change as far as your own ambitions and career is concerned. I mean, you don't have to have a career or be working to experience this change, by the way. There just does seem to be a slight change of emphasis, and that's connected with Venus on being on the verge of changing signs, and Venus is actually quite close to Neptune, and Venus is on the Aries point. And there may be a few things that you thought you really understood and you'd made up your mind about, and you thought it was important to you. And then when we've got Venus making that conjunction to Neptune, Venus about moving back into Pisces, and you're not so sure, or rather you're about to be less sure. And that might be a good reason why you need to be concentrating on what other people are doing or not doing, and providing help where necessary, and not always spending time on yourself and your own priorities. Because when it comes to your own priorities, if you actually think about what is really important to you, if you're honest, you're not as sure as you used to be. And it may take a bit of time before you really know what you want. I'm talking about maybe at least a month. And it might have something to do with Venus, because Venus goes back into Pisces, and then it doesn't actually go back into it doesn't go into Aries again until the end of April. So do consider that, and be open to new possibilities and new directions, because as far as yourself is concerned, you haven't got all the answers. When it comes to other people, you might have a good set of answers for them, which could make them feel happier and more confident. So, that's a good reason to be focusing on others. And as far as your own interests are concerned, well, they can sort themselves out in their own good time. Aquarius, the moon is very late in your sign, getting ready to move into Pisces, and the moon in late Aquarius does make a square to Uranus. And this aspect between moon and Uranus, it could shake things up a little. There may be things happening which you find ever so slightly worrying. I don't think they are serious, but still you might perceive them as being serious, and because of that moon square Uranus, you might want to make a special effort to be stubborn. You want to hold your ground and just not budge an inch. And you will certainly be in a strong position, but maybe you're exaggerating. Maybe no one actually wants you to move. No one is actually trying to undermine you, but you might think they are. And so try to be real. And don't assume a conflict if it doesn't actually exist. And it just may be that things are absolutely fine as they are. No one cares. People are not paying you as much attention as you think they are. And you therefore can be a little more relaxed, and you can afford to be more open. And this applies to conversation and interaction. Your first inclination might be to just not do anything, not say anything, not reveal anything. But once you start talking, once you start engaging with people, you'll find that things do change. Because actually, Aquarius, at the moment, you're a great conversationalist. And you can talk about anything. You don't have to give anything away. People want to talk, and they want to talk to you. And the more people talk, the more people they talk about themselves, the more positivity you can reveal. And even if you yourself don't feel 100% optimistic, you can pass on to other people a lot of good vibes, and you can cheer them up. And this is maybe somewhat unusual. It's not normally how one sees Aquarius. Of course, that is a stereotype one might get from Aquarius. This kind of heavy, independent-minded, Saturn-ruled sign, or even if you think it's a Uranus-ruled sign. I don't think it's a Uranus-ruled sign, by the way. I don't believe that Uranus rules Aquarius. But still, you can just show a pleasantness today which is going to be very much appreciated, and you can make the world better, and you can make people feel better about themselves. So do use that opportunity. And then towards the end of the day, as the moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces, the emphasis might change a little. There may be a little more focus on money. Whenever sort of a moon moves into Pisces, if from the Aquarian perspective, the financial dimension can become more important. So if there's anything of a financial nature that you have ignored, or you decided it wasn't important, it may just come back into focus. But I don't think that there's going to be a great deal of pressure in this direction, and perhaps you can prepare yourself to deal with financial issues, and just give yourself a bit of space, calm, work out what's important financially, and then if financial issues do crop up, not today, but tomorrow or the day after, you'll be ready, you'll be prepared, you'll have the answers. And so just because money doesn't feel itself to be a pressing concern today, it doesn't mean to say it won't become important a little bit later, as you move into sort of the sort of end of a week, sort of Thursday, Friday. So that's something you can do, but I don't want to make a big deal about it. Pisces, the moon eventually gets into your sign. It could be tomorrow, it could be today, it could even be this morning if you're in California or Hawaii or Alaska. And when the moon moves into your sign, that's always a good time. It's when you feel that you're part of things. You feel confident. You feel that you understand what's going on emotionally. You always understand what's going on, really, but at the moment, with the moon moving through Aquarius, you're not feeling entirely sure of yourself. Especially late Aquarius, you're wondering what exactly you're supposed to be doing, and there might be pressure to do something, to make some kind of decision, but it's not a time for making decisions. It's not a time for feeling that there's anything in particular that needs to be done, and you're also aware that things can change very quickly. And if you open your eyes, you can see that change all about you. So if you were to decide to do one thing one moment, then the next moment something else might happen, and you have to revise your plans. And in your own way, you're actually quite inspired. And inspiration is always a good thing, of course, but inspiration can be difficult if it upsets your plans. And so if you have a fixed idea, but you have an expanding awareness, the two things really don't fit. And one aspect we do have today, which we should pay some attention to, is a quintile between Mercury and Jupiter. And this quintile between Mercury and Jupiter is working on an inner level. It's not saying much about the world around you. It's saying something about your mind, and it's the way your mind is working and the way ideas are forming. And there are lots of ideas forming. This is a time when a lot of people are very perceptive. We shouldn't forget that Venus and Mercury, they may be in Aries, but both of those planets are still making conjunctions to Neptune in Pisces. So it is a very inspired, emotional time when a lot of us are very sensitive. And you, Pisces, you of all the 12 signs, with Neptune still there. Neptune doesn't move into Aries for a few more days. And you have all these ideas and all these thoughts, and you're trying to piece them together. And Mercury quintile Jupiter is helping you, and you're starting to see the picture. You're starting to understand what you should be doing, but I don't think you're there quite yet. It's something in process, in progress, a plan that is forming, and you're getting this feeling that you are on the right track, and you're starting to imagine what could be possible if you were to execute this plan. And there might even be a little bit of a sense of excitement there. But don't be in a hurry. You've still got some thinking to do. And yeah, the main emphasis is on thinking, not even doing anything. Just work it out still. But soon enough, those thoughts will have crystallized, and you will be ready to declare your hand. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was the cauldron, number 50. Cauldron is it's a very powerful hexagram. It's about bringing together everything that we are. It's about refinement. All of us have got many talents, many attributes. We've got our experiences, we've got our friends, we've got our contacts. Sometimes we take it for granted, or we don't recognize that we've got a particular ability. But the cauldron is asking us to put it all together. And that today is something we can do and something we really should be focusing on. But we do have some moving lines, and the bottom line moves. So if you think about the cauldron, there may be a number of ways of looking at it. So one view might be that the cauldron has something at the bottom, like a sump, maybe. Is that the right word, a sump? Or something where you can clear out the garbage. You can undo something, maybe. But I don't know, a Chinese ritual cauldron, I can't believe that it has something at the bottom to undo things so that you can take out the garbage. Maybe it does. I don't really know much about Chinese ritual cauldrons. Alternatively, as the I Ching suggests, you can turn the cauldron upside down as a way of clearing it out. And this is maybe what we have to do, what the I Ching is recommending. In order to make the most of everything we've got, we have to remove certain stuff that has just congealed and is clogging things up and is no longer any use. So perhaps we've got to be more streamlined, and we need to recognize what is holding us up and be able to let go of it. And also the fourth line moves. And the fourth line usually isn't such a bad line, but there is a problem here. And it talks about spilt food and embarrassing ourselves because of spilt food. The food goes everywhere. And the cauldron represents a container for what we are, everything we are. And if something spills, it means that we've taken something too far, or we have got ourselves into a situation where we just aren't good enough. We thought we could go all the way, and we've embarrassed ourselves. And this does indicate that today we have to be very careful about making promises, because if we make promises, we might find we're just not up to scratch. And this really does indicate that we have to work harder to concentrate on who we are and who we are not. It's not just an easy process. I do know that today there is a quintile between Mercury and Jupiter, and I think that this quintile between Mercury and Jupiter may encourage us to have great thoughts about who we are and what we can do, and then we might want to put it all into action. And in terms of my readings of the 12 signs, I was very optimistic about this Mercury quintile Jupiter, but maybe the I Ching is indicating that I was a little bit too optimistic. Yeah, we can have great ideas and we can plan them, but when it actually comes to putting them into action, they may not work. We just might have taken on too much, and as a result, we could make a fool of ourselves. And then, because we've got two moving lines, we move to a different hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 26, which is the taming power of the great. Now, I missed putting the 26 in, so let me just put the 26. So the 26, this hexagram is more of the same in a way, or rather it's a natural consequence of the cauldron and that fourth moving line where we're not up to it. And the taming power of the great is saying, yeah, we are great, but not quite as great as we think we are. And something has to be tamed. And we do need a sense of self-discipline here. And just because we think we can do something, maybe we shouldn't. Yeah, in theory we might be able to, but we've got to do some more reflecting. Think back about the lessons of the past, and then realize that restraint is a good thing, and sometimes it's best to hold back. We might think this is a great opportunity. Let's show the world what we can do, but today we do have to be careful. It's just because we already know that there's a danger that we take on too much. And, if instead we can learn and be aware of our limitations, then at a later stage, we might actually be ready for the challenge, and the food won't spill and we won't make a fool of ourselves. So patience and restraint could actually be very important today. And now I want to revisit the horoscope of Mark Carney. And this time round, I have his time of birth, which is 7:56 and 7:56. So let's look at Mark Carney's horoscope. I mean, sorry if you find this boring, and if you're not interested in, that's Kamala Harris's chart. Let's look at Mark Carney's chart. So, Mark Carney is Prime Minister of Canada. He is quite an important person. I know I talked about him yesterday, but when I talked about him yesterday, you could say, well, what I said was pretty vague because you don't have a time of birth. This time we do have a time of birth. And the annoying thing about Mark Carney's chart is that in some respects he's got a really good chart. And if you look at Mark Carney's life, it's just gone swimmingly, hasn't it? You know, he went to Harvard, he went to Oxford, got a job with Goldman Sachs, governor of a Bank of Canada, governor of a Bank of England, prime minister. Just so easy. I mean, he is Canadian prime minister. He was not even a member of the House of Commons. How easy is that? The House of Commons, I believe, is the Canadian legislature. Is that the lower house? And normally, if you're going to be prime minister, you have to be a member of the House of Commons. It's like in the UK. I mean, you can be a senior minister, like David Cameron was foreign secretary when he was a member of the House of Lords. But it's unusual to not be in the House of Commons and be a minister like the foreign secretary and certainly the prime minister in the UK. And it's, I think, the same in Canada. But everything is easy for him. And this easiness is totally reflected in his chart. He has got Jupiter rising. He's got 25 Taurus rising and he's got Jupiter. Okay, you might say, okay, he's got Algol rising. That is true. I don't know how close the ascendant is to Algol. Maybe we haven't seen Algol reflected yet. So, I mean, Algol is quite a nasty fixed star. His ascendant is, how far is it from Algol? His ascendant is, it's 25 minutes from Algol. So it's close enough. So far, we have not seen the full impact of that Algol rising. And maybe we will in the future. But, for the moment, with that Jupiter rising, that makes him lucky. Especially as Jupiter is in mutual reception to Venus. And, there's Venus he's got Venus in Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces. So it's a strong Venus, even though it is conjunct the Sun. And Venus is making a sextile to Jupiter. And so Venus is in the sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter is a sign of Venus, and got Jupiter rising. That is a really quite amazing signature. I'm really, really fortunate to have that Venus mutual reception to Jupiter, and that does seem to be how it's worked. Just had a completely smooth career, and he's got another mutual reception. He has got Mercury in mutual reception to Mars. So he's got Mercury in Aries, the sign of Mars, Mars in Virgo, the sign of Mercury. So that might give him an intellectual capacity. I mean, I've already said he doesn't have any planets in air signs. But as I must make it clear, just because you've got no planets in air signs, it doesn't mean you're not intellectual. Some people with amazing intellects have no planets in air signs. But what it means with no planets in air signs, to my mind, is that it's someone who's got a pretty clear view of the way things are, the way things should be. And there may actually be a certain lack of flexibility here. And okay, I know he's got a lot of mutable planets in Pisces and Virgo, but still, lack of air, he's kind of made up his mind about the substantive issues, and he's not really going to change them. And that might be how the lack of air works. So just those two factors, just those two mutual receptions, do put him in a pretty good position, I would say. Now, why have I got a picture of Kamala Harris on the thumbnail? And, I was reading the comments recently, and it was suggested to me, before I knew his time of birth, that it was a good time for Mark Carney because he was moving into a first house profection. So the concept of profections is that every year the ascendant changes sign. So he has Taurus rising. So every 12 years you go through the signs. So when he was 12, his perfected ascendant would be Taurus again. So you can say that, when you're 12, you kind of go into a first house kind of year. It's a very generic transit. All of us are going to have that 12th house. We're all going to have, at the age of 12, our first house repeating itself, and goes through the multiples of 12. So at 24, at 36, at 48, and of course at 60. And so at 60, 60 is supposedly a fortunate year, according to this logic. So Mark Carney turned 60 on March the 16th, and 2 days earlier he'd been sworn in. So you might then say that, in a very generic sense, that turning 60 is fortunate. Well, an argument against that is Kamala Harris, because like Kamala Harris, like Mark Carney, Kamala Harris had elections around the time of her 60th birthday. So, looking at Kamala Harris, she was born October the 20th, 1964. So she turned 60, about 2 weeks before the election? So is it the case that turning 60 in itself is fortunate? It was certainly a first house time. Everyone was seeing her for who she was. She was in the news, but as it happened, she lost. And this was in spite of the fact that she had the North Node rising. North Node in Gemini. North Node works really well in Gemini. And in spite of that, she didn't win. Now, I didn't buy this idea that the perfection was gonna help her win. As you know, I thought she was going to lose, and there were reasons for that. So as soon as she turned 60, her perfection ruler activated. So she had Gemini rising, and so we would have to look very closely at her Mercury. And at the time of the presidential election, Mars was at the presidential election 24. Mars was at 0 degrees 40 Leo. So she had Mars, this malefic planet, on her Mercury, and so that really scotched things for her. It didn't work out, and she lost. There were many other reasons why she lost, and of course, when you hit a new birthday, you get a solar return, and I'm not going to go into her solar return but her solar return was pretty disastrous. So there is no reason why turning 60 and your first house perfection, why it should be good. Now, that doesn't mean to say that Carney is going to lose. Now, let's have a look at Carney's chart in terms of this perfection. He has Jupiter rising, and his Jupiter is in mutual reception to Venus. So you could say that he's got a Venus in pretty good shape going into this election. This election is at the end of April, and so there is certainly a signature there of him winning. And though Saturn at the moment, of course, is in Pisces, and so you could say that Saturn at the moment is causing problems for him, especially now that he's had his birthday. Venus is, if you like, his ruler of the year. So Saturn is conjunct his Venus. So you could say, well, things are going to be difficult for him. But by the time the election happens, just a reminder, Saturn will still be in Pisces, and in fact there is a Venus conjunct Saturn there, and so that's kind of interesting that Venus is on Skeet, it is conjunct Saturn, so that does put him under a certain amount of pressure when the election comes, and Saturn may not be exactly transiting his Venus, but it's certainly in the same sign. And so from a perfection point of view, it is a mixed message. And then there's a question of how much weight do you put on transits? And in the case of Kamala, she had Mars on her year ruler at the time of the election, and that was one of the many reasons why she lost. With Mark Carney, he's got Saturn in the same sign as his Venus, but there's also a Venus-Saturn conjunction, and so the profections do give a somewhat mixed message there. And we also have to consider his solar return, because we now that we know when Mark Carney was born, what time he was born, we can look at his solar return. I've set this. That's Kamala Harris's solar return. We don't want to see that. Sorry, Mark Carney's solar return. So this solar return, I've adopted my usual approach. I have not set his solar return for Ottawa. I've taken the solar return for where he was born, which is Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories. Now, you might argue with me there. You might say, no, you should always look at the place where someone is born. Sorry, where someone is resident. And so you could say, well, you should set it for Ottawa. But I think the first solar return we should look at is we should set it for where he was born. And he's got moon rising. That is a powerful solar return. The moon represents the people, the Canadian people. He's doing a lot of campaigning. So the solar return is already telling us, what we already know. But the moon is making a square to Mars. Now that moon square Mars is troublesome, and it does indicate that he may get some flack as the election campaign proceeds. I'm not going to say that moon square Mars again indicates he's going to lose the election. I'm just saying we have to be aware of that moon square Mars. Also, Pluto is conjunct the IC, and that represents some kind of upheaval, something he is certainly taking seriously, and we know that at the time of the election he has got Mars opposition Pluto. At the time of the election there is an aspect between Mars and Pluto. They're making an opposition, and Mark Carney has a Mars-Pluto conjunction in his natal chart. And so, that Moon-Mars square, we do need to be concerned about it. And it may link up with Carney's own chart, because Carney has a Moon-Mars-Pluto conjunction. Anyway, he's got a Moon-Mars conjunction in his chart. Moon is exactly conjunct Pluto. Moon is exactly conjunct Mars. So this really does emphasize that this is someone who is really into power. Power and control is really important to him. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If you want to get into politics, you do need to have a sense of your own power. You have to be in control. That's certainly important. But maybe he will sort of push things too far. That's certainly possible. And of course, now we have his time of birth. We can look at his solar arc directions. Now, solar arc, there is a very interesting solar arc direction here, and it's his sun. His solar arc directed sun is at 2440 Taurus. So the sun, he's just turned 60, so you move the sun approximately 60 degrees. Well, in fact, in this case, it's 59 degrees. So his solar arc directed sun is right on his ascendant. And we do have an accurate time of birth. And so the sun on his ascendant means sudden prominence. He's suddenly, everyone can see him. And it's not just that the sun is on his ascendant. In his natal chart, he has Sun sextile the ascendant. There's his Sun, there's his ascendant, and so the Sun has moved forward, and as soon as the Sun hits the ascendant, that's when he becomes prominent. That's when he becomes prime minister. So you could say, even if he loses the election, he's still been prominent. He's still reached the absolute heights of Canadian politics. But I do think that is a major aspect, and on balance, it should work in his favor, because the Sun is still getting closer to the ascendant, and so if you want Carney to win, that would possibly make you feel good. That would support your argument. And I want to finish by looking at his Vedic chart. Because with Vedic astrology, you do need a time of birth. It's really important. It's very difficult to do a Vedic chart without the time of birth. And I mean, you can do a Chandra Lagna chart where you make the moon the ascendant, but even that's a bit vague, and sometimes you don't know what sign the moon is in. So here is Carney's Vedic chart, and just remember, with the Vedic chart, everything moves back 24 degrees, 23, 24 degrees. He still has Taurus rising, because he had in his Western chart he had 25 Taurus rising, so this means he's got his ascendant at 1 Taurus, and so the Vedic chart has its own power, because you can see that there are a lot of planets in Kendras. So a Kendra is an angular house. Angular house, yes, it's an angular house. The first, 10th, 7th, 4th house, and so he's got Rahu, the North Node, in the ascendant in the first house. He's got Venus and Saturn in the 10th house. By the way, these numbers are the signs. So he's got Venus-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, and in the 10th. Then he's got obviously Ketu in opposite Rahu. The South Node is in the 7th house, and then he's got this Moon-Mars conjunction in the 4th house. So it is a strong chart, and he's got Venus in the Venus-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius in the 10th. Saturn in Aquarius in its own sign. Remember, he's got Saturn in Pisces in his Western chart, so he's got Saturn in Aquarius in his Vedic chart. So you can see how he was marked out to be leader of his village, or in this case, leader of his country. And so, it's certainly strong. And he is currently in his Jupiter Dasha. So the Jupiter Dasha runs from July 2014 through to July 2030. So it's a 16-year Dasha. So I believe at the time his Jupiter Dasha started, he was governor of the Bank of England. And at the time, everyone thought he was great as governor of the Bank of England, though there are mixed views about how effective of a governor he actually was. And, in retrospect, maybe he wasn't quite as effective as some people make out, because that does depend on your political perspectives. But as we know, the British economy is a complete disaster right now. That might not have been his fault. That was maybe to do with COVID and other things, and general political mismanagement political and economic mismanagement since he stood down as governor of the Bank of England. But it's very difficult to judge these things. And he was quite a political governor of the Bank of England. He did say what he believed was the case. He was a great believer in net zero. And even, you wouldn't have thought the governor of the Bank of England should be interested in that, but he was. He appeared not to be a fan of Brexit, so he did express his opinions. But I don't know whether he was a good governor of the Bank of England. I'm not in a position really to be able to say whether he was with any degree of certainty. And it does depend on your politics. And so his Jupiter Dasha must be working well to some extent, because in his Jupiter Dasha, he's already Prime Minister of Canada, even if he loses the election. So we have to think about the state of his Jupiter. According to the Shadbala system, it's a reasonably strong Jupiter. It has reasonably high strength, and it's one of the stronger planets in his chart. Venus and Saturn are the strongest planets in his chart using Shadbala. But Jupiter is in the 12th. Jupiter in the 12th house can be about foreign travel in Indian astrology, about living abroad, because in India, traditionally, living abroad is seen to be somewhat unfortunate. Of course, nowadays in sort of modern culture, it's seen to be great. Travel, living somewhere else, not living in one's homeland, that's something to be welcomed, but not necessarily in traditional Indian culture. So that's his Jupiter in 12. But it must be working quite well to some extent. And at the moment, he's in his Jupiter Mahadasha, and he is in his Sun Subdasha, I think. Is it? Yeah. On January the 28th, 2025, just as Justin Trudeau was preparing to stand down, he moved from his Jupiter Venus to his Jupiter Sun. So we really have to think about the Sun and how well placed it is. And the Sun in his chart is, it's of middling strength. He's got the Sun in the 11th house. The Sun is a malefic. The 11th house is an Upachaya house. It's a growth house. And so when you've got the Sun in an Upachaya house, because it's a malefic, it sort of works quite well. So there's nothing especially problematic about the Sun. The Sun rules the 4th house. It's ruler of that Moon-Mars conjunction. So fast, though, his Sun Subdasha starts at the end of January. He's already Prime Minister, so it's looking good. But what can change? One thing can change, and that is Saturn. Now, we know that Saturn is in Pisces in Western astrology. But in Eastern astrology, Saturn is in Aquarius. So Saturn is moving through the end of his 10th house. So it's his Saturn return, really. Plus, Saturn is making a conjunction to his Venus, but he seems to have survived Saturn conjunct his Venus. But Saturn changes sign. Saturn moves into sidereal Pisces. When does that sign change happen? It happens, I think it's late March, early April. So when Saturn moves into sidereal Pisces, it will straight away make a conjunction to the Sun, and the Sun is ruler of his current subdasha. Now he has had Saturn. He did have Saturn conjunct his Venus when it was right now. He's got Saturn conjunct his Venus, and Saturn seems conjunct his Venus, transiting Saturn conjunct his Venus. Well, seems to work pretty well for him. But what's going to happen now? Maybe the Sun will not be able to look after itself as well as Venus was able to do. So I think that over the next week or two, there could be a big change for Carney as Saturn moves from sidereal Aquarius to sidereal Pisces. Will it be a disaster? I don't know. I haven't really looked at Carney's chart in as much detail as I should have done. I haven't looked at other charts. But with Carney, we just shouldn't forget that Carney is lucky. He was born lucky. He was born with this amazing chart. He's got Jupiter rising in mutual reception to Venus, and with his annual perfection now in his first house, with that strong Jupiter on the ascendant. Yeah, I would have said that things are looking good, but we should never judge an election just from a point of view of one man's horoscope. You've got to look at other things. You've got to look at, collective trends. I wouldn't be able to have been able to predict that Trump was going to win or lose just by looking at Trump's chart. I mean, the main reason I knew that Trump was going to win is because I looked at Kamala's chart, because Kamala's chart was completely horrible. That's why I thought that Trump was going to win. But I don't quite have enough information to say for sure that Carney is going to win. But you can see the problem for anyone who wants Carney to lose. He is lucky. And will his luck suddenly break? I don't know. I'll have to look at the matter in more detail. So sorry to talk about Carney again, but I think I did have to talk about his chart, given the fact I said yesterday that I didn't know his time of birth, and actually his time of birth was available. So I hope I've been able to make up for yesterday's video. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.